Hi, my name is Kirill Vishnyakov. I'm a fourth-year student at St. Petersburg Polytechnic University, and I also work as a data scientist at Software Analytics. And today I'm going to present my talk on how Catalyst-powered projects advanced my academic career. So the plan of the talk is the following. So first I will start with deep learning baby steps. In this section, I will tell how I was starting out in the field of deep learning in terms of how I should write my code and how my pipeline should be structured. Then I will proceed with don't show this to anyone. In this section, I will provide an example of bad deep learning pipeline. Then I will go with how do I get better. In that section, I will describe Catalyst Config API, a tool which can help you build a deep learning pipeline. And then I will go with a section named what to do next. In that section, I will tell you how you can push your Kaggle or any other pet projects even further. And finally, I will summarize my talk in a section called Story So Far. So deep learning baby steps. So around a year ago, I was starting in the field of deep learning and I wanted to gain some practical knowledge. And my goal was to learn how to write a deep learning pipeline. And at that moment, I basically had no prior knowledge in terms of what tools should I use, what are the best practices, what framework should I use, and etc. And at that time, there was a Kaggle competition named Understanding Clouds from Satellite Images. It was a semantic segmentation competition. Basically, you were given a set of satellite images, and there were 4 different cloud organization patterns. And your task is to segment those 4 different cloud formations given a satellite image. So I decided to join this competition and went to Kaggle notebook section, and there was posted a great baseline notebook by Art Gore, Andrei Lukyanenko, and it was written using a Catalyst deep learning framework, and basically it was my first encounter with a Catalyst. So I got some baseline score with that notebook, and the next question I've asked myself is, how do I get a better score? Well, to get a better score, you need to implement different ideas that you might read on forum, that you might get from some YouTube video or from different research papers. And as your pipeline grows, the more and more subtleties and boilerplate code there will be. For example, my pipeline consisted of multiple stages. Basically, on the first stage, I was training with some loss function, say x, and on the second stage, I was training with some other loss function, let's call it y. And I also had to make some extra effort to make transitions between stages. I had to transfer weights in a proper way, I change datasets, paths, and etc. So I've spent around 2.5 months on that competition, and I ended up winning a bronze medal. And basically my baseline knowledge in terms of how I should write my deep learning code has been acquired. So at that time I was using a command line interface, and basically I had a very big pipeline with lots of parameters and lots of subtleties. And for each parameter, I had to add a separate handler for that parameter using argparse library. And as you can see, it's just already just painful to watch, and it's more painful to debug. And it's really a bad way how you write deep learning pipelines. So, and I've also was using this command, like the whole big thing, to run my pipeline. And I was literally that guy on a picture that I had to, because I had to manually go through all the arguments to make sure that they have the exact values that I want, that all the Boolean flags make sense, and so on. And it was also quite inconvenient. So how do I get better? Well, after I finished the first competition, I have stumbled upon some GitHub repos that were using a Catalyst config API. And I will tell you what is a config API in a minute. So I digged in config API and decided to get better at it. And there were a Kaggle competition named Bengali AI handwritten grapheme classification on Kaggle. It was a multitask classification problem where you were given a grapheme on the left, and you had to predict 3 different targets from the single grapheme, namely a target called root, a target called vowel, and finally a consonant. So what is a config API? A config API provides you a very convenient way to specify your experiment parameters. So you can set everything up in a YAML configuration file. It has different sections. For example, it has a section dedicated to model parameters called model params, where you can have a name of the Python class of your model, and you may have here like any number of your additional parameters that you need. You may have an args section where you can define your log dir, experiment dir, and so on. You may have a stages section where you can define different stages of your pipeline, and you basically can specify everything inside this file. And if you want, you can go with that link below to see this more in details. But TLDR, it provides you a very convenient way to structure your pipeline in single configuration file. So actually getting better. So I was participating in that Bengali competition, and I've spent again around 2.5 months. And I actually ended up in top 2%. It is 41st place that I took out of 2K teams. And it was my first solo silver medal. And by the end of that competition, I learned how to use Catalyst config API. So I had no more boilerplate code that you have seen around 2 minutes ago. And I was also using a two-stage pipeline. And in this time, it was very convenient to write a two-stage segmentation pipeline with a config API, with the help of config API. So during this competition, I employed several sort of batch-wise augmentation to my pipeline. And I ended up actually submitting a pull request to Catalyst repo with a Cutmix implementation. Cutmix, it's one of the examples of such batch-wise augmentation. And it was my first contribution to open source DL project. And I think it's very cool. So you can see here like Cutmix callback. So, okay, the next question. I have finished 2 Kaggle competitions, and what should I do next? Well, I actually decided to write an academic paper on the results of first Kaggle Klaus competition, that's semantic segmentation competition. And in order to write an academic paper, you first need to define a problem, then you need to conduct experiments, and finally, you need to provide a conclusion and answer to the defined problem. So at that time, I was already experienced with config API, and I had that old pipeline from the first competition, and I just decided to refactor it like old ugly multi-stage pipeline with the help of config API. So the good thing is that I didn't need to write any inference scripts or any like additional scripts that, for example, do post-processing, because they all could be defined as a standalone stage inside a configuration file. And actually, at some point, I was using a pipeline with 4 stages, and I will briefly talk about it. So my pipeline looked like this. So I had the first stage where I trained with all images with actually pseudo labels. You can see like a callback specified here. And actually, the good thing about YAML is that you can use YAML anchors so that you can refer to them later, that you don't, and it's very convenient, so you don't need to copy paste like that whole thing here. You just can refer to that YAML anchor. On second stage, I was training with a different loss, symmetric low-edge loss. And I was training without pseudo labels, using only train images. And finally, I had inference stage on which I basically was inferring the test data. And actually here, like there could be a third stage on which I do a post-processing step, but I decided to discard it. So there is a link down below to my pipeline. So pushing things forward. Me and my co-author decided to study how choice of different sets of pseudo labels and input image resolutions affects final result. Basically, we had generated two sets of pseudo labels. The first set contained only confident pseudo labels. The second set was contained basically all the available test images. And we also decided to train and see how we will end up with different image resolutions. And when research was finished, it was time to apply to machine learning summer school. At machine learning summer school, it's basically a 1 to 2 week activity where you watch lectures and on different machine learning topics and network with other people. And in order to get into such school, you need either to provide an abstract or a poster. And an abstract is basically a short document that describes the work that you've done. And we'll briefly look at how the poster should look like. So me and my co-author were able to qualify into 2 summer schools this year. The first one is Eastern European Machine Learning Summer School, EEML, on deep learning and reinforcement learning. The second one is the SMILE School, a summer school of machine learning at Skoltech on machine learning. And I had great experience being part of such events. And it's also worth mentioning that participation in such events is a nice addition to your CV. It provides you good opportunities to land a new job or to get into some cool master's or PhD program. So how does it actually look? So on the right-hand side, you can see our poster. It's basically a summary of our work. You can see like figures, the references, our approach, the description of the problem, and so on. So so now we want to finish our paper and submit it on the conference as proceedings. And I also want to mention that summer schools are great in terms of networking and gaining new knowledge. For example, I had great time watching lectures on different topics such as causality or geometric models in machine learning, or for example, or reinforcement learning lectures. So I definitely have broadened my knowledge in the field of machine learning. So story so far. Okay, so if you want to learn how to write deep learning pipelines, you may explore Kaggle and GitHub. You may also want to look into Catalyst Config API, even if you aren't going to use it at the moment, because it gives you a great intuition on how things should be structured and how you should structure your experiment parameters. And also don't hesitate to push your Kaggle projects even further. You may want to write a research paper as a result, or a blog post, or etc. And finally, you can contribute to Catalyst Deep Learning Library if you want to get some open source experience. I also had to mention that the maintainers of Catalyst are very friendly and helpful, and I had a great time contributing to Catalyst. And I think that's it. Thank you for your attention. See you. Bye.